not have a disk drive. If you have a digital edition console, you can still use this method to jailbreak your console. Now, it doesn't really matter if your console's a Fat, Slim, or Pro. What really matters is the firmware version that the console is running. That will determine if the console is jailbreakable or not, and you can tell that by going into the settings, scrolling down to System, System Software, and Console Information. Now, if we zoom in here, after the first dash here, we have our firmware version. So this number here represents your firmware version. So I'm on firmware 12.70, 12.70. That is currently the highest firmware that is jailbreakable on the PS5. So as long as you have a firmware version up to 12.70, anywhere from 04.03 to 12.70, and any number within that range, between 4.03 and 12.70, you will be able to do this jailbreak as long as your firmware version is not higher than 12.70, like 13. something, then you are not going to be able to jailbreak, and you'll have to wait for a new jailbreak to be able to jailbreak that firmware. Now, in order to set up the console further, if we go back and go into System Software Update and Settings, we want to make sure both of these options are unchecked. So downloading update files automatically and installing update files automatically, and I would also back out to your network settings and make sure you uncheck the box to connect to the internet so that we don't accidentally update to a higher firmware that could potentially patch the jailbreak. So in order to do this jailbreak, it does require, unfortunately, resetting the console for now. And that basically means factory resetting the console so you lose all of your installed applications and save data that's already on your console. You can make a backup of that stuff first so that you don't permanently lose it forever. I will cover how to do that as well, but just be aware that in order to set this jailbreak up with this particular method, it does require resetting your console. If we switch over to the computer, we want to download a few things. All the download links will be in the video description. We want to go ahead and download the latest release of Elf Arsenal from Sonic ISO. Download the Elf file here. This is an all-in-one toolset for the PS5, and it will come in useful for things we want to do later on in the series. We also want to grab Nano DNS, the latest version for PS5, not the PS4 version. Make sure you download the PS5 version. And we're also going to be using an autoloader to run the jailbreak, but this will be in the form of a backup file, which I will leave in the video description. There's two backup files, so you want to download the one that corresponds to your firmware version. So there'll be one backup file for firmwares 4.03 up to 12.40, and then another backup file for firmwares 12.60 plus, so for 12.60 and 12.70. So you want to download the backup file that corresponds to the firmware version that your console is running. So if you're on 4.03 up to 12.40, you would download this backup. And if you're on 12.60 or 12.70, you would download this backup. So now we want to copy these files to the root of a USB drive. So right-click on your USB drive and go to Properties. Make sure the file system is set on exFAT, exFAT. If it's something different, you'll have to back up the data on your USB drive and then reformat it by right-clicking on it and going to Format and selecting the file system as exFAT and clicking Start to reformat the drive. Then go into the drive, open up the backup file that corresponds to your console, your firmware version. So in my case, I'm on 12.70, so I'll need the 12.70 plus version. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the PS5 folder to the root of your USB drive. Do not put the folder inside any existing folders on the drive. Just copy it straight into the root of the drive. So once we've done that, we can then copy our Nano DNS and Elf Arsenal payloads to the root of the USB drive as well. Now that is all you need on the USB drive for now, but just to demonstrate some of the things that you can do once you're jailbroken, I'm also just going to copy a example package file for a PS4 game, Minecraft. I'm just going to copy that over to the root of the USB drive as well, so that we can get PS4 applications installed. For installing PlayStation 5 applications, we just create a Homebrew folder on the root of the USB drive, and then inside that folder, we can copy any PlayStation 5 applications. Like I've got a PS5 game here. Now, they come in two different formats, either a folder that has all of the game files inside, or just a single file. So whichever version you have, just copy the folder or file into the Homebrew folder, and that will get that installed as well. Obviously, I'm not going to leave links to that stuff down in the video description for obvious reasons. These are just being used as an example of what you can do once you're jailbroken. So anyway, now what we can do is unplug that USB drive and plug it into the PS5. Okay, so on the PlayStation 5, we're going to head into our settings. We're going to go to System, System Software, and Backup and Restore. Now again, If you want to back up your own console first so that you don't permanently lose any, applications and save data forever, you can back up your PS5 here and then simply go ahead and select any games, save data, screenshots that you want to back up and create the backup file. Once that's done, you can copy that backup file somewhere safe on your computer so that you don't permanently lose it. You can always restore it at some point in the future to get your save files and anything else back on the console. But obviously, again, for restoring the new backup that contains the jailbreak, this will wipe your console, so last warning here. So we're going to go ahead and restore your PS5, and then simply select the backup file that we put on the USB that contains the jailbreak, and we're going to restore that onto our PlayStation 5. And now we just wait for this to complete. Okay, so back after restoring the backup file, as you can see in the media section, we now have the YouTube application installed with the exploit set up. We also have this user account on here too, which is used to load the YouTube application, so do not delete this account. You can make other accounts that you can use just to use your console normally, but keep that account on there for loading the jailbreak for now. If we go into the settings, we want to get connected to our network. You can use this offline, but it's recommended to get a network connection to get everything we need installed. So we're going to go to Network, Settings, Connect to the Internet, set up an internet connection. Now the wired network should already be configured for you to block connections to Sony servers so that you don't get system or game updates. So we can select the wired network if you're connecting with an Ethernet cable, and it should just connect no problem. Now it will say it failed to connect to the internet, but it is connected to your local network when it says that, so we should be good there. If you're connecting to a wireless network, you do not want to just select one of the networks in your network list and connect to it, because that will connect unprotected before you get a chance to change the settings. So what you should do is head down to the Setup Manually option at the bottom, and then use Wi-Fi, enter manually, enter your SSID, which is your network name, as well as your security method, which should be WPA, enter your password, but change the DNS settings to manual, and change the primary DNS to 127.0.0.1. And that is how you want to have everything set up, so that as soon as you connect to your Wi-Fi network and you click Done, it will be connecting while blocking Sony's servers. So that's what you want to do there. Now, once you are connected up to your network, you should be good to now run the jailbreak. So we just load up the YouTube application, and it should trigger the jailbreak to load on the console. As you can see here, it starts loading. Now, if you're on a firmware above 10.1, it will look like this. It will say it's running something called P2JB, and it takes around 50 minutes for this jailbreak to run through to completion. Unfortunately, that's just the case for people who are on firmwares between 10.20 and 12.70. And this jailbreak takes up to 50 minutes to load, give or take a few minutes, and then it should proceed with the rest of the steps of the jailbreak after that time has elapsed. So just come back after 50 minutes, and hopefully it loads successfully. If it fails, it will crash the console, and you'll have to just restart and try again. If you're on an older firmware than 10.20, 10.1 or below, it will use a different jailbreak, which will run within just a few seconds. So it'll only take a few seconds, and you should then be loaded up onto the payload manager once the jailbreak is loaded successfully. So once you get the jailbreak loaded successfully and you're on the payload manager, we can then proceed to the next steps. Okay, so once we're on the payload manager, we can customize how we load different things with the jailbreak. So if we go into our settings, I can uncheck the box to also load the browser page whenever we load the jailbreak. We want to tick the box to scan USB payloads. And then if we go to Manage Payloads here, scroll down, we should have the payloads that are on the USB drive, and we want to move them to the internal storage. So select Alpha Arsenal, move to internal storage, select NanoDNS, move to internal storage. So we can go ahead and do that. So once that's done, if we go back into our settings, we can now uncheck the box to scan USB payloads. And if we go back to the dashboard and simply press the options button and reload, we have our payloads that are on the internal storage now, and we want to run NanoDNS. NanoDNS will give us our internet access while blocking Sony servers. So now we have proper internet access. So if we go into Manage Payloads and we refresh the cloud repository, it should load all of the other payloads that are online that we can download. So if you're on a firmware 10.1 or below, I would recommend installing ETA-hen, which is kind of an all-in-one payload. So you can install that and use that as your primary method for jailbreaking. If you're on firmwares above 10.1, ETA-hen is only really supported properly with test builds on higher firmwares. So for people above 10.1, I would recommend just installing KStuff Lite, which will allow you to run your PS4 and PS5 applications, and also something called Shadow Mount Plus, which allows us to automatically mount our PlayStation 5 applications, which is going to be very useful. So that's all I'm installing for now. There's lots of other useful payloads we can install that we'll get into later in the series, but for now, these are just the essentials. So if I go into the auto load, we can enable the auto loader. This will allow us to auto load these payloads whenever we run the jailbreak next. We don't have to load them manually. We can add case-up lights, Shadow Mount Plus, and Nano DNS to this list. Now, Elf Arsenal is kind of an optional one right now. It's kind of an all-in-one tool set that allows you to remotely access your console from another device. It's definitely very useful, but it can be slightly unstable on certain firmware versions right now. So, it's up to you if you want to add this right now. I would keep it in the payload manager because it will be useful later on. But whether you want to also load it right now, it's kind of up to you. Can also add custom delays. And what this is for is so if one payload is not finished loading before it starts loading the next payload, it can cause some problems. So you can always add a delay and then put that delay in between the payloads that are having issues. Some consoles, you need to add these delays between the payloads loading. On my console, it's never really been a problem, so I tend not to add the delays, but not all consoles are the same. So that's the general setup there. So because we're not running the autoloader right now, we're just going to go ahead and load Keystuff Lite manually, and we'll get that loaded. And of course, Shadow Mount Plus. And when we load Shadow Mount Plus, if you remember, I did put a PlayStation 5 game backup in my USB drive in the Homebrew folder, so Shadow Mount automatically mounts that for me, so I can run my PlayStation 5 application. That is what Shadow Mount is used for. PlayStation 4 applications are package files. They need to be installed through the debug settings. If you go into the settings, scroll down to debug settings, which is enabled when you're running the jailbreak. You can go to game, and then ignore this error message that always pops up. And then you can go to Package Installer, and you'll have your package files on the root of the USB drive showing up here. So you can select it and install it, and that's how you install your PlayStation 4 applications. And there we go. It is now installed. So I can run these applications no problem. Because I'm running Kstuff Lights, it allows me to load my PlayStation 4 applications. And with Shadow Mount Plus and Kstuff, I'm able to load my PlayStation 5 applications as well. If I try and load this game of Resident Evil, it will also launch. I do lose signal for a few seconds. That's just what happens when you load Resident Evil games. And as you can see, we have the game loaded successfully. So there's a few other things just to mention here, a few other settings that we can customize. So that's all you really need to do for the main setup. We did also install Elf Arsenal, which is another payload we can try. So the payload manager is available through this shortcut that gets created when it's first loaded. So you can load that back up, and that will take you over to the payload manager. And then we can load Elf Arsenal as well. So we'll just go ahead and load this up. Now, Elf Arsenal has so many different payloads and things all built in, so it takes a while when it does its first time setup to install everything. Now, after Elf Arsenal is finished with its first time setup, it should eventually create this shortcut on the homepage. It might take a while, it might take a few minutes before this pops up. But we have this shortcut, which will allow you to access the web panel directly on the console itself. So it can take a long time to load, but once it loads, you'll be able to access the web panel here, and you can do things like, access the file manager, remote file management to access the file system of your console. There's payloads, there's package installers to install package files, Homebrew that you can download, and lots of other very useful settings. So we'll definitely be looking at this more deeply in future videos. And also the other big thing about this, because the one that uses the console's browser here is not the best way to use it. It's really designed to be used remotely for remote management of your PS5 from another device that's connected to the same network as your PS5. So like your phone or your computer that's on the same network, you can just enter your PS5's IP address in the URL bar with :6969, which will take you over to this web panel on your computer or phone's web browser, and it'll be more easy to manage the console from there. So you have this remote management tool that you can use with your PS5 with Elf Arsenal. So now when we reload the jailbreak, it should automatically go ahead and load all of those payloads directly off the hard drive without the USB drive needing to be plugged in. We can go ahead and test this by restarting the console. Now when you reboot the console, everything you installed while you were jailbroken will still be installed, but you will not be able to run any of those applications like Homebrew Applications or Game Backup when you're not jailbroken. They will just say it cannot start this application. That is what will happen when you try to load them. So you just have to load the jailbreak again by running the YouTube application, waiting for the jailbreak to complete, and then you'll see here that it goes through and then runs all of our auto-load payloads. So it's running KStuff Lite, Shadow Mount Plus, our Nano DNS payload. It's loading all of those payloads automatically for us. And then, of course, once it's done, we should be able to load our application. So by trying go and load Minecraft again, you can see it is actually loading normally. So that's what you need to do. Just reload the jailbreak after you restart the console, and then you'll be able to load your applications and you'll be jailbroken again. If you're using the jailbreak that takes 50+ minutes to load, you can, of course, put the console into rest mode instead of turning it off. Then when you want to use your console again, just recover from rest mode, turn it back on, it will recover from rest mode, and the jailbreak session will still be running, so your console will still be jailbroken, and you won't have to rerun the jailbreak every single time that you restart it by putting it into rest mode instead of turning it off. That is what I would recommend for those of you guys who have to wait the 50 minutes to load the jailbreak. So anyway, that's the basic setup on how to get the jailbreak running on a PS5 from firmware 4.03 right the way up to 12.70. And don't go anywhere because I will be adding lots more videos to this series to show you guys how to take full advantage of your jailbroken PS5 and all the different things that you can do with it. So that will be coming fairly soon, and I'll be adding those videos to the playlist that's linked in the description. So anyway,